One of the main services that we offer at Avondale Media Services is a course on media skills. So what's that all about? Well, that's all about when somebody in your company or organisation is called upon to do a radio or a television interview. What happens? Well, very often what happens is that the person is ushered into a room with a couple of advisors, probably from the company, perhaps from outside as well. And they are sat down and they are told very sternly to identify the 3 or 4 things which we must get out during this interview. So these elements of the story are identified, and there's nothing wrong with that. It is very important to identify the message which one wants to get across. However, what happens then very often is that that message is actually sacrosanct in the mind of the person who goes on the radio. The result is they often end up with one aim almost in their mind, and that is to satisfy the people who briefed them, the people who said you must get this message across, and that is the dominating thought as they're in the interview. And what happens? Actually, they forget what the interview is actually all about. The interview is all about the relationship, not just between the interviewee and the interviewer, though that's very important. The interview is really all about the relationship between the interviewee and the listener. That relationship is mediated by the interviewer, and the interviewee has to be terribly aware of the place of the interviewer in the relationship. There are 3 people in this relationship, but it really is important to understand before we do a media interview just what is going on and just what we must know and be aware of in terms of the listener before we can have any hope that the listener will actually hear or understand the message we want to get across. If we go into the interview really dominated by thoughts of the 3 or 4 things that we must say, well then we are actually not going to be heard. At Avondale Media Services, what we do is we explain just exactly what is going on. We run a day-long course or a 2-day-long course, depending on the amount of practice people want or have time for. But a lot of the time what we do is we analyse interviews which have happened just to look at how we as listeners respond to them, because that's how we really learn and understand how other people as listeners are going to respond to us. Then, armed with that insight and knowledge, we then start to identify who our listener is going to be, what we want them to think, feel and believe at the end of the interview, how we are going to get them on side, how we are going to join them where they are, so that we can lead them to where we want them to be. Check out the course. It's on this site.